He did not reach for the car. He was crouching beside it, 3 inches from the front wheel, his hand resting on his knee, his eyes reading the undercarriage the way a doctor reads a face. Not touching, not close to touching, just looking, the way a man looks when he already knows the answer and is only confirming what he suspected. That was when she came out. Her heels hit the parking garage floor like a verdict. Serena Voss was 34 years old, the chief executive of Voss Meridian Group, and she had not become either of those things by tolerating strangers near her property. "Don't touch my car," she said. He looked up at her. He did not stand immediately. He finished the thought he was having, whatever it was, then straightened slowly, the way men straighten when they are not afraid of the person they are straightening to face. "I wasn't touching it," he said. "You were about to." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked back at the car, a silver Aston Martin DB12, 3 weeks old, 40 yards from the private elevator she took every morning from the underground garage of the Voss Meridian Tower. It was the finest car in the garage. It was also sitting at a slight angle that no 3-week-old car should sit at, and the left front tire had a pressure variance that anyone paying attention would have noticed from 6 feet away. He had paid attention. "Your left front tire is going to blow," he said. "Probably within the next 8 miles. I'd have the pressure checked before you drive it out of here." She stared at him. He was wearing dark work trousers and a gray shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. His hands were clean, but the kind of clean that takes effort, the clean of someone who works with engines and has learned, over years, to scrub them properly. He had a lanyard around his neck with a facilities badge. He had a daughter at home named Mara, who was 7 years old, and had asked him that morning whether cars could feel lonely. He had told her he thought some of them probably could. Serena Voss looked at the badge. She looked at the tire. She looked at him. "I'll have my driver look at it," she said. "Your driver won't know what to look for," he said. Not unkindly, just factually, the way he said most things. She walked past him to the elevator without another word. He watched the elevator doors close. Then he crouched back down beside the tire, because the car couldn't defend itself, and he thought that was a shame. His name was Callum Reed. He was 38 years old and had been working facilities maintenance at the Voss Meridian Tower for 4 months, which was long enough to know which elevator made a sound on the 14th floor that nobody else had filed a report about, and which section of the parking garage roof had a slow water ingress that would become expensive if ignored until spring. He had filed reports on both. Neither had been acted on yet. Before the badge, before the gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up, before the underground garage and the facilities locker and the route he walked every morning starting at 6:15, Callum Reed had been a different person in a different building. Not a better person. He was careful about that distinction, but a person whose name appeared on different kinds of paper. For 9 years he had been a senior engineer and then technical director at a firm called Stratos Automotive Development, which designed propulsion systems for production vehicles under contract to 6 of the 12 largest car manufacturers in the world. He had held 4 patents. He had been the lead on a project that redesigned the fuel delivery architecture on a class of performance vehicles that had previously been prone to catastrophic failure at high speed. The project had saved, by conservative estimate, the lives of people who would never know his name. He had left Stratos 14 months ago. The leaving had been quiet. No announcement, no farewell event, no LinkedIn post. He had cleared his desk on a Thursday afternoon in April and driven home to his daughter, who was sitting at the kitchen table doing a worksheet about rivers, and he had made her a cheese toast tie and helped her label the tributaries of the Amazon, and he had not thought about Stratos again for several weeks. The reason he had left was not complicated, but it was private, and he had not shared it with his manager or with his colleagues or with the HR department that had called 3 times in the 2 weeks after his resignation to ask if he was certain. He was certain. His wife, Clara, had died 22 months before the resignation. A brain aneurysm, sudden and complete, on a Wednesday morning in February while Mara was at school and Callum was in a meeting about tour calibration. By the time he got to the hospital, there was nothing left to get to. He had gone back to work the following Monday because he had not known what else to do, and because Mara needed routine, and because the particular grief of losing a person all at once rather than slowly had left him standing inside his own life like a man who has walked into a room and forgotten what he came for. Work had felt like the only room where he still knew what he was doing. But somewhere in the 14 months between Clara's death and the resignation, something had shifted. He had looked around the meetings and the projections and the patent filings and the carefully managed career path, and he had thought, none of this is what Mara needs me for. What Mara needed was a father who came home before she went to sleep, who made cheese toasties and helped with river worksheets, who was present in the particular way that presence means something to a 7-year-old, not financially present, not career present, but physically, reliably, daily there. The facility's job at Voss Meridian paid considerably less than his previous salary. It also started at 6:15 and finished at 3:30, which meant he was at the school gate every afternoon by 3:45, which was the only number that mattered to him now. He had not told anyone at Voss Meridian about Stratos. He had not told anyone about the patents. He had listed his previous employment honestly on his application. He was not a man who misrepresented things, but he had not elaborated, and nobody had asked, and he had become, to the building, simply the quiet man in the gray shirt who filed accurate reports and fixed things before they became expensive. He was fine with that. Serena Voss had inherited the name and built everything else herself. Her father, Marcus Voss, had founded Voss Meridian Group 28 years ago as a mid-sized commercial property firm with 3 buildings and an instinct for undervalued land. When he died of a stroke 6 years ago, the firm had 17 properties, a portfolio worth approximately $400 million, and a daughter who had spent the previous decade learning every part of it from the inside out. Serena had taken over at 28. She was now 34. In 6 years, she had grown the portfolio to 41 properties, restructured the firm's debt 3 times, and overseen 2 acquisitions that industry commentators had called either brilliant or reckless, depending on which quarter they were writing about. She was not warm. She was not unkind exactly, but she was precise in the way that people become precise when they have been responsible for something enormous for a very long time, and precision does not leave much room for softness. She spoke in outcomes. She measured relationships in their usefulness, not callously, but practically, the way you measure tools. She had 2 people in her life she trusted completely. Her chief of operations, a woman named Iris, who had been with the firm since her father's time, and her driver, a retired police officer named George, who had been driving her for 4 years and who knew, without being told, that she needed 3 minutes of silence after difficult board meetings before she was ready to speak. She did not have friends in the way that most people had friends. She had colleagues she respected and contacts she maintained, and a personal trainer she saw on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, who had, over 2 years, learned not to make conversation before 9:15. She had not been in a relationship since a man named David, an architect, who had lasted 14 months and ended things because, as he had put it with the careful diplomacy of a person trying not to be cruel, he felt like a meeting she kept rescheduling. She had thought about that sentence for a long time afterward. She had eventually decided he was not wrong and that this was simply the cost of being who she was, and she had filed the conclusion away and moved on. She was not unhappy. She did not experience her life as lacking. She was simply a woman who had built something significant and was maintaining it, and the maintenance left very little time for anything else. She did not think about the man in the parking garage after she stepped into the elevator. Or rather, she thought about him for approximately 40 seconds, the tire, the lanyard, the calm way he had spoken to her. And then Iris called with a question about the Hartwell lease negotiation, and Serena thought about the Hartwell lease negotiation instead. At 2:15 that afternoon, George brought the car around from the garage, and the left front tire blew out on the ramp before he reached the street. Nobody was hurt. The car came to a controlled stop on the concrete slope. George called Serena immediately. She was in a meeting with 3 attorneys and took the call because George never called during meetings unless it mattered. She stood very still for a moment after he told her. Then she said, "Handle it," and returned to the attorneys. She did not go back to the garage that day. Mara Reed was 7 years old and had 3 firmly held opinions about the world. The first was that cheese toasties were better when the cheese was slightly burned at the edges, which her father understood and always achieved. The second was that rivers were more interesting than anyone gave them credit for, which she was prepared to defend at length. The third was that her father was the best mechanic in the world, which she stated as fact because to her it was one, and which she based on the evidence that whenever anything was broken, the kitchen tap, the bicycle chain, the heating element in the toaster, her father fixed it quietly and without drama, and it stayed fixed. She had not used the word mechanic to describe him until she was 5, when she had learned the word and applied it to everything. Her father had told her gently that he worked in a building now rather than on cars, and she had considered this and said that it was the same thing, really. And he had not argued because she was not entirely wrong. She met him every afternoon at the school gate at 3:45. She had a specific routine for the walk home. She told him 3 things that had happened that day, in order of importance, and he listened without interrupting, which was the only rule. And then she asked him one question, which he had to answer honestly. On the Tuesday after the parking garage, the day after the tire blew, she told him that she had learned about photosynthesis, that a boy named Jerome had told a joke that was genuinely funny, but that she would not repeat it for reasons she declined to specify, and that she had lost her favorite pencil and suspected the classroom radiator. Then she asked, "Daddy, did anything interesting happen today?" He thought about it honestly, as required. "A car's tire blew out," he said. "I warned the driver's employer yesterday that it was going to happen. She didn't listen." Mara considered this. Was she sorry? "I don't know," he said. "I haven't spoken to her today." "She should say sorry," Mara said. "That's what you're supposed to do when someone was right and you didn't listen." "Yes," he said. "That's what you're supposed to do." They walked the rest of the way home talking about photosynthesis, which Mara found personally impressive as a concept, and Jerome's unjoke, and the suspicious radiator, and by the time they reached the apartment Callum had decided not to think about Serena Voss again, because it was not his business whether she said sorry or not. He made cheese toasties. He burned the edges slightly. Mara ate hers with the contentment of someone whose expectations have been exactly met. Outside, the evening came in cold and ordinary and enough. She was in the garage before him. This surprised him, because it was 6:20 and his shift technically started at 6:15, but he was always 5 minutes early, and he had never once found anyone else in the garage at that hour. Serena Voss was standing beside her Aston Martin, repaired now, a fresh tire, the car level and still, in a dark coat, and her hair down, which he had not seen before. She had a takeaway coffee cup in each hand, which he had also not seen before, and she was looking at the car with an expression he could not immediately read. She heard him and turned. She held out one of the coffee cups. He took it, because it would have been rude not to. "It blew on the ramp," she said. "Yesterday afternoon." "I heard," he said. "George wasn't hurt. The car is fine." "I know. I checked it this morning before you arrived." She looked at him. "You checked it?" "It was on my route." A pause. She looked at the coffee cup in his hand. He had not yet drunk from it. He wasn't sure whether it was a peace offering or a test, and he had learned, over a life of reading things carefully, not to respond to something until he understood what it was. "I should have had it looked at," she said, "when you told me." "Yes," he said, not unkindly, just accurately. She absorbed this. Most people, in his experience, softened the agreement. "Oh, well, you couldn't have known," but she took the accurate answer without adjusting it, and he noted that about her. "I came down early to say that," she said. "I'm not someone who doesn't say it." He drank from the coffee. It was good coffee, the kind from the cafe on the ground floor that he never bought for himself because it was £4.50, and he was saving for a bicycle for Mara. "Thank you," he said, "for the coffee or for acknowledging it?" "Both," he said. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth exactly, but the precursor to it. The removal of the thing that had been in front of warmth. "How did you know?" she asked. "About the tire. Pressure variance in the left front. You could see the sitting angle from the elevator. The car was 3 weeks old, which means it left the dealer with a slow fault they missed, or it picked one up in the first few days. At the speed you drive out of here in the morning, high-stress acceleration on a cold morning, it was going to go." She looked at him for a long moment. "You know cars?" "Yes." "Facilities," she said, reading his badge. "Yes." She did not press it. He did not offer it. They stood in the garage with their coffee cups and the repaired car between them and the particular quiet of an underground space at 6:20 in the morning, and neither of them spoke for a moment. "Callum Reed," she said, reading the badge. "Serena Voss," he said, not reading anything, because he already knew. For the first time, she almost smiled. Almost. She took the elevator. He began his route. Iris Chandra had worked for Voss Meridian Group for 21 years. She had worked for Marcus Voss first, as his personal assistant, and then as his operations manager. And she had watched him build the firm from 3 buildings to 17 with the patient attention of someone who understood that building things takes longer than people want it to. When Serena had taken over, Iris had stayed, not out of loyalty to the name. She had loyalty to the firm itself, the thing that had been built, not the people who owned it. But because she had watched Serena for 2 years before Marcus died, and she had understood that Serena was going to do something significant with what she inherited, and Iris was the kind of person who wanted to be near significant things, she had been right. She had also been watching Serena for 6 years, with the close attention of someone who knew the difference between Serena when the numbers were good and Serena when something else was happening. On the Wednesday morning after the coffee in the garage, Iris noticed that Serena arrived on the 42nd floor looking different. Not dramatically. Not in any way that the board members or the legal team or the 3 analysts in the open office would have noticed. But Iris noticed, the way she noticed everything. And the difference was this. Serena was slightly more present than usual. Most mornings Serena arrived already inside the next meeting. Her eyes were occupied with whatever problem she was carrying from the previous hour. She moved through the lobby and the elevator and the glass doors of the executive floor with the sealed efficiency of a system running at capacity. She was there, but she was also somewhere ahead of there, already working. This morning she arrived and looked at the room. That was the difference. 1 beat, no more, where she simply saw where she was. Iris brought her the morning briefing and the coffee and said nothing. That afternoon, she put Callum Reed's HR file on her own screen and read it. She read it the way she read everything, thoroughly and without judgment. She noted the previous employer listed as Stratos Automotive Development and the title of Technical Director, and the 4-year gap between that and the facility's application. She noted that the file contained no explanation for the gap and no cover letter beyond the standard form. She searched Stratos Automotive Development. She found an industry profile from 4 years ago. A technical director named Callum Reed was quoted in a piece about propulsion system safety standards. The photograph showed a younger version of the man from the garage, in a suit, in a conference room, looking slightly uncomfortable with the camera. Iris read the article twice. Then she closed the browser and thought about what to do with what she knew. She decided to do nothing with it. It was not her information to share. If Serena wanted to know who was working in her garage, she was capable of finding out. And if the man in the garage had chosen not to offer the information, that was also his right. And it was not a small thing, the choosing of that, and Iris understood it in a way she could not have fully explained. She sent Serena a note about the Hartwell lease instead, because that was what the afternoon required. The crisis, when it arrived on a Friday. Voss Meridian's largest single asset was a commercial development called the Callaway Riverside Complex. 12 floors of mixed commercial and retail space on the South Bank. Opened 3 years ago. Currently 47% occupied. The occupancy rate had been a source of quiet concern at the board level for 18 months. It was not catastrophic, but it was not what had been projected, and the gap between projection and reality had begun to attract the attention of the firm's 2 largest institutional investors. One of those investors, a fund called Alcott Capital represented on the Voss Meridian board by a man named Roland Fitch, had spent the previous 2 months building a private case for a partial asset sale. His position, which he had aired in 3 consecutive board meetings, with increasing confidence, was that the Callaway complex was underperforming structurally, and that the firm's capital would be better deployed in a managed disposal rather than continued investment. Serena had disagreed each time, clearly and with data. The data, she believed, supported a patient's position. The complex needed a different anchor tenant strategy, not an exit. On Friday, Roland Fitch arrived at the board meeting with a report she had not been given advance sight of. The report had been commissioned from an external consultancy and ran to 40 pages. Its conclusion, reached through a methodology that Serena immediately suspected but could not immediately disprove in the room, was that the Callaway complex had a structural occupancy ceiling of 52% given its current configuration, and that continued investment would produce diminishing returns. The board was 12 members. 3 of them were Serena's appointments. 5 were legacy appointments from her father's era, most of whom trusted her but were susceptible to a confident data set. 4 were institutional representatives, 2 of whom she was certain Roland had spoken to before this meeting. She needed to dismantle the report in the room, today, without preparation. She asked for the methodology appendix. Roland slid it across the table with the smooth confidence of a man who believed he had already won. She read it, all 12 pages. The room waited with the particular patience of a board that has learned not to interrupt Serena Voss when she is reading something. The methodology had a flaw. She could see it. The consultancy had modeled occupancy ceiling based on floor plate configuration and access metrics, which was standard, but they had used traffic flow data from the complex's first operational year, which was the worst year, the year when the retail fit-outs were still incomplete and 3 of the planned access routes were still under construction. The model was not wrong exactly, but it was anchored to a moment that no longer existed, and it was presenting a structural conclusion from what was actually a transitional data set. She could see it. She could explain it. But to explain it convincingly in the room, in the next 20 minutes, before Roland moved for a vote, she needed the actual traffic flow data from the complex's 3rd operational year, which was the current year, and which would show the access patterns had normalized in a way the model had not accounted for. She did not have that data in the room. She needed it in the next 15 minutes, or she was going to lose the vote. She sent Iris a message under the table. Callaway traffic flow data. Current year. All 3 access points. I need it in 10 minutes. Iris replied in 40 seconds. I know someone. Give me 8. Iris's message to Callum Reed was brief and came to the facility's general line at 2:47 on a Friday afternoon. It said, I need to speak with you about a building systems matter. It is time sensitive. Please call this number. He was on the 14th floor, checking the elevator mechanism, the sound on 14 that nobody else had filed about when the message came through. He called the number. Iris answered immediately. She explained what she needed with the compressed efficiency of someone who was managing several things at once. The Callaway Riverside Complex. Traffic flow through the building's 3 main access points. 3rd operational year. Current data. She needed it in 8 minutes. The complex has a building management system, Callum said. If it's integrated correctly, it'll log foot traffic through the access point sensors as part of the HVAC zoning data. I can pull it if I have remote access credentials. You have them, Iris said. Your facilities. The system credential is in the shared maintenance drive under Callaway BMS. Give me 5 minutes, he said. He was at the data in 4. The system was logging what he expected it to log. He pulled the access point data for the current operational year, ran a quick summary by quarter, formatted it into something a boardroom could read in 30 seconds, and sent it to Iris's email with a single line of annotation. Q3 access volume is 34% above year 1 baseline. The model is anchored to transitional data. Iris forwarded it to Serena's phone. Serena received it with 6 minutes remaining before Roland moved for a vote. She looked at the annotation. She looked at the data. She looked at Roland Fitch. Then she turned the screen of her phone to face the board and began to speak. The vote went 9-3 in favor of continued investment. Roland Fitch sat with the expression of a man who had arrived at a meeting expecting to leave with something and was leaving with nothing, and had the professional discipline not to show how much this cost him. Serena did not look at him when the meeting concluded. She gathered her papers and thanked the board and walked out with Iris at her elbow. And in the elevator, she said nothing for the 3 minutes that George's silence protocol had taught her was the right amount of time to say nothing. Then she said, "Who gave you the data?" Iris looked at the elevator doors. The facilities team. Specifically. A pause. Callum Reed. Serena was quiet for a moment. The man from the garage. Yes. Another pause. The annotation. He knew what the model's flaw was. Yes, Iris said. He did. The elevator reached the lobby. They stepped out. Serena's car was waiting. George, the black sedan, the engine running. She stopped before she reached the door. What do you know about him? she asked. Enough, Iris said. Tell me. Tell me. Iris told her. Stratos Automotive Development. Technical Director. 4 patents. The Propulsion Safety Project. The gap. The facilities application with no cover letter. Serena listened without interrupting. She was very good at listening when the information mattered. He didn't tell anyone, she said. No. Why? Iris looked at her. I think you should ask him that yourself. She was there the next morning at 6:20. No coffee this time. She had not wanted it to look like a pattern, like she was managing something. She was simply there, standing by the elevator, when he arrived. He saw her and did not break his stride. He walked to his start point, set down his bag, and looked at her. The board meeting, she said. I heard it went well. The data you pulled, the annotation. He waited. You knew what the model flaw was, she said. In one read of a summary. The anchor year was wrong, he said. It happens when consultants take the first available data set without checking whether it's representative. That's not a facilities observation, she said. He looked at her steadily. No. Stratos Automotive Development, she said. He did not react visibly. He had known this moment would arrive at some point, or one like it. He had simply not been certain of the timing. Technical Director, she said. 4 patents. The AP, 7 propulsion safety redesign. Yes, he said. You've been fixing elevators. The elevator on 14 makes a sound that suggests a bearing fault developing. If it fails during peak hours, it will strand between 12 and 20 people and cost considerably more to repair than the bearing costs now. He paused. I filed a report 3 weeks ago. It hasn't been actioned. She looked at him for a long moment. Why are you here? She said. Not unkindly. Genuinely. He considered how much of this to say. He was a private man. He had been a private man for a long time, and the privacy had become its own kind of protection, not against people, but against the weight of explaining himself to them. But she had come down at 6:20 in the morning without coffee. That meant something. My wife died 22 months ago, he said. My daughter is 7. I left a career that required me to be elsewhere for too many hours in a row. This job ends at 3:30. I'm at the school gate by 3:45. Every day. Serena was very still. That's why, he said. Not failure. Not hiding. Just a different calculation about what matters. She looked at him. Something moved across her face that was not the boardroom face, and not the garage face, and not any face he had seen on her before. Something unmanaged. Your daughter, she said. What's her name? Mara. How old? 7. 7 and 3 months. Does she know what you used to do? He almost smiled. She knows I fix things. She thinks all fixing is the same thing. Is she wrong? He thought about it honestly, the way Mara had taught him to. No, he said. Not really. He submitted his resignation on Saturday morning. Not because of the conversation. Not because she had found out who he was, or because the privacy had been broken, or because he was embarrassed. He submitted it because in the conversation he had felt something he had not felt in 14 months of facilities work. The particular discomfort of being seen clearly by someone intelligent, and the awareness that being seen clearly was going to make everything harder to manage. He did not want harder to manage. He had Mara. He had the school gate. He had cheese toasties and river worksheets, and the bicycle he was saving for. Those things were calibrated. He had worked very hard to calibrate them. He submitted the resignation through the online HR system at 9:15 in the morning, while Mara was in the living room reading a book about ocean currents, which she had decided were the most interesting thing in the world this week. At 9:47, Iris called. He didn't answer. She called again. He answered the second time, because it seemed unfair to make her call 3 times. She wants to speak with you, Iris said. I submitted my resignation, he said. I know. She wants to speak with you before it's processed. It doesn't need to be processed in person. Callum. A pause. Iris used his name carefully. The way people use a name when they want the other person to understand they are being serious. She's been in the office since 7 this morning. On a Saturday. That's not normal. He looked at Mara, who had fallen asleep over the Ocean Currents book with her cheek on her hand, which she did sometimes on Saturday mornings when the reading was absorbing and the sofa was warm. "I have my daughter," he said. "Bring her," Iris said, and rang off before he could answer. He did not bring her to the office. He brought her to the cafe on the ground floor of the building, because the cafe was open on Saturdays and had hot chocolate and a window seat that looked out onto the street. And he told Mara he needed 20 minutes, and she said fine, and ordered the hot chocolate with the seriousness of someone placing a significant order. He went up to the 42nd floor. She was in the glass-walled conference room, standing at the window looking at the city. She turned when he came in. "You resigned," she said. "Yes, because I found out who you are." "Because it makes things complicated," he said. "And I don't have room for complicated." "Sit down," she said. He sat. She remained standing for a moment and then, as if deciding something, she sat too, across from him, the way she had sat across from Roland Fitch 18 hours ago, but with none of the boardroom composure. She looked, he thought, like a person who had been awake since 7 because something was sitting on her chest and she was trying to work out what to do with it. "I want to offer you a role," she said. "I have a role. A different one. Head of Technical Operations for the entire property portfolio. It's been vacant for 8 months because I haven't found someone who understands both the engineering and the commercial side. You understand both." He said nothing. "It pays considerably more than what you're earning," she said. "I'll structure the hours around your daughter's school day. I'll put it in writing. You leave at 3. Every day. No exceptions unless there is a genuine emergency, and we define genuine in the contract." He looked at his hands. The clean hands
Because
that
you
had taken
saved my
years
board
to
meeting
learn
to
with a
clean
5-line
properly.
data pull
Why, he
and an
said.
annotation that took you 4 minutes and showed more strategic understanding than the 40-page report I was presented with. She paused. "And because you warned me about the tire, and you were right, and I didn't listen, and I should have listened." Mara said the same thing. He said, "That you should say sorry when someone was right." Something crossed her face. "Mara, my daughter. You told her about the tire. She asks me every day if anything interesting happened. I'm not allowed to lie." Serena looked at the table for a moment. When she looked up, the thing on her face was softer than anything he had seen there before. "Is she downstairs?" she said. "In the cafe. Hot chocolate. She's given me 20 minutes. That's very precise. She's a very precise person." A pause. The city spread out below them, Saturday quiet. The morning light moving across the buildings in the particular way it moved when the air was cold and the sky was clear. "I'm not easy to work with," she said. "I want you to know that going in, I have very specific ideas about how things should be done, and I don't always communicate them in advance." "I worked in automotive engineering for 9 years," he said. "I understand systems with very specific requirements." She almost smiled. Almost, in the way she had done it the first morning. The almost that was doing the work of a full smile. "The bearing fault on the 14th floor elevator," she said. 3 weeks without action on the report. "It'll be fixed on Monday." "Good," he said. "Will you take the role?" He looked at the window. He thought about Mara downstairs with her hot chocolate and her ocean currents. He thought about Clara, who had said once, not about anything in particular, just as a general observation, that the best decisions were the ones that felt like returning somewhere rather than arriving somewhere new. This felt like returning. "I need the hours in writing," he said, "and Mara comes first. Every time." "I know," she said. "That's not a condition I'm willing to negotiate." He looked at her. "Why not?" "Because a man who structures his entire life around being at the school gate every day is not someone I want to negotiate that out of," she said simply. He held that for a moment. "Then yes," he said. "I'll take it." 3 weeks later, Mara met him at the school gate at 3:45, which was when she always met him, and told him 3 things in order of importance. First, that she had learned about ocean trenches, and they were even more interesting than ocean currents, which she had not thought possible. Second, that Jerome's second joke of the month had not been as good as the first, which was a disappointing development. Third, that her friend Pip had asked why his car was different now, because it was a better car, and she had said it was because he had a new job. Then she asked her question, "Is the new job good?" He thought about the 42nd floor and the conference room and the window that looked out at the city. He thought about Iris, who had called him Callum in a way that meant she was being serious and had been right to be. He thought about a woman who had arrived at a garage at 6:20 in the morning without coffee because she was not someone who didn't say it. Yes, he said. I think it is. Mara nodded, satisfied. They walked home in the cold afternoon. She held his hand the way she had held it since she was small enough to need to, which she no longer needed to, but did anyway, because some habits are not about need. He held hers back. The same reason. At the corner of their street, she looked up at him. Daddy, she said. Yes, the lady from the car, the one who didn't listen about the tire. What about her? Is she nice now? He considered it honestly, as the rule required. She's getting there, he said. Mara accepted this with the patience of someone who understood that some things take the time they take. Good, she said. And they went home. Every story begins with a man nobody believes in. Every story ends with the world catching up to who he always was. Stay until the end, because the most important moment is always the quietest one.